will
The
be
Hundred
named
Years'
regent.
War between England and France,
If the
spanning
Queen
from
bears a son,
1337
it is
to
simple.
1453,
If not,
was a conflict marked by political intrigue, bloody battles,
Moi,
shifting alliances,
Philippe, par la
and the
grâce
eventual
de Dieu, roi de
transformation
France.
of the medieval
The
world.
logistics alone
Though the
will
war was
bankrupt
not
the
a
crown,
continuous
sire. It is
fighting,
far
but
too
rather a
dangerous.
series of intermittent
matter is
battles,
settled.
truces,
We move on
and uneasy
Paris.
peace periods,
To
it
reclaim my
fundamentally
rightful
altered
crown,
the landscape
I
of
hereby
European
declare
power
war on
and
Philip
deeply
VI.
impacted
By the
both
grace of
nations.
God, Edward,
The
King
origins of the Hundred Years' War can be traced to the dynastic conflict that arose in France following the death of Charles IV in 1328. Charles IV, the last of the direct Capetian line, left no male heir, and the throne passed
must
to his
press the
cousin,
advantage here
Philip
by the
VI
western gate.
of the House of Valois.
Ensure the blockade is
However,
complete.
Edward III of England, who was the grandson of Philip IV of France, believed that he had a stronger claim to the French throne through his mother, Isabella of France. Edward's claim, however, was rejected by the French nobility, who preferred Philip VI as their king. The rejection sparked a series of confrontations, which culminated in England's declaration of war on France in 1337. The war was not initially about territorial expansion or the control of specific lands, but rather about the assertion of royal authority and dynastic legitimacy. In the early stages of the war, the conflict was largely centered around the Flemish and the Channel
Yield,
areas,
King John.
crucial for
Your
trade
courage
and
is
naval
great,
control.
but the field is lost.
Flanders, which was under French control, had significant economic ties with England, particularly in the wool trade. England sought to exploit these economic tensions to gain allies and to attack French territories that were economically vital. Meanwhile, the French Navy was heavily reliant on its fleets to cut off English trade and disrupt England's economic interests. One of the most notable early battles was the Battle of Sluis in 1340, where the English Navy decisively defeated the French fleet, establishing naval dominance for the English. This victory gave England control over the Channel, ensuring that they could safely transport troops and supplies while weakening the French ability to retaliate via naval forces. Amid the battles, another tragedy struck both England and France, the Black Death,
By the grace of God,
the plague which
receive
ravaged
the royal
Europe
crown.
between 1347 and 1351, caused widespread death, and its impact was particularly severe on both nations. While the war temporarily paused during the outbreak of the plague, it also had long-term effects on the conflict. The reduced population in both kingdoms led to labor shortages, economic hardship,
not
and
trust the
political
church here in
instability,
ruin? Will you
especially in
submit to the
France,
judgment
where
of the
much of the
church?
war
I
was
have come
fought.
to you from God.
As a result of the
I will
Black
not
Death,
recant.
the English and French experienced profound social changes. In England, the plague caused a serious disruption to the feudal system, as the labor shortage resulted in a stronger bargaining position for peasants. Meanwhile, in France, the consequences were more devastating, as the plague further weakened the ability of the monarchy to defend its territory.
We have won.
By 1346,
Normandy is ours.
the English military fortunes were beginning to improve. Edward III, with a well-trained army, decided to invade France directly. His army landed on the French coast and marched towards Crécy, where they encountered a much larger French army. At the Battle of Crécy, the English achieved a stunning victory. One of the key factors in the English success was the use of the longbow, a powerful
20 sous
weapon
per
that could
bushel
shoot
seems
arrows
reasonable
with
given
great
the
range
security
and
you now
force.
provide.
The French
Agreed.
army,
We
heavily
both
reliant
benefit
on
from a
knights
strong
and
market.
cavalry, was ill-prepared for the devastating impact of the longbow. The English archers decimated the French ranks, and Edward III's forces decisively defeated the French, despite being outnumbered. The Battle of Crécy was a turning point in military history. It demonstrated
must
the
ensure
effectiveness
the
of
walls
the
are
longbow
stout,
and
Master
marked
Mason.
the decline of the traditional
England's
knightly
future
cavalry
rests on
in
these
medieval
strong
warfare.
foundations.
It also allowed Edward III
Pull together
to
now,
continue
steady.
his invasion,
Hold it
eventually
there,
laying
almost
siege to Calais, which would remain in English hands for over 2 centuries.
Let this treaty forever
As the
seal
war
the peace
dragged
between our
on,
nations,
both
Louis.
sides
Indeed,
experienced
Edward.
periods of
May this
peace
accord
and
bring
renewed
prosperity
conflict.
to both our
By the
peoples.
early 14th
Raise your
century,
glasses, men.
France was in a desperate position.
is finally
The English had gained control of large
To the
portions
king.
of French territory, and the French throne itself was in jeopardy. However, in 1429, a remarkable figure emerged from the peasantry, Joan of Arc, Joan, a young peasant girl from
Sir,
Damarie,
we are taking
claimed
heavy
to have
losses.
received
The
divine
horses
visions
panic. We
instructing
must
her to
retreat.
lead France to victory.
Nous
She
atteindrons le
convinced the
ciel avec
French
cette
king,
flèche.
Charles VII,
La
to allow
France
her to
renaît.
accompany his army, and her presence quickly inspired the French troops. Joan's most significant achievement was lifting the siege of Orleans, a crucial French stronghold, in 1429. Joan's success revitalized French morale, and she continued to lead French forces in key victories. Despite being captured by the English in 1430, Joan's legacy lived on, and her martyrdom was a powerful rallying cry for the French.
people of France
In
honored Joan of Arc
1456,
with
a
statues and
posthumous trial
commemorations.
declared her innocent,
Her
and she was
legacy lives on
canonized as a
as the-
saint in 1920. By the early 1450s, the English had lost much of their French territory. Despite earlier successes, internal turmoil in England, including the Wars of the Roses and the renewed strength of France under Charles VII,
charter proves the
contributed
land
to
is
the
ours,
English's
not the
eventual
Lord's.
collapse in France.
the harvest
In
together
1453,
Yes,
the
our
English
future
were
depends on
finally
it.
defeated at the Battle of Castellon, which marked the end of the Hundred Years' War. The war had been long and bloody, but the final French victory
figures are
heralded
clear.
the emergence
Without the
of a
wartime
unified
subsidies, the
French
estate
kingdom
faces
and
ruin.
the end of
must consider
England's
our position in
territorial
Europe.
ambitions in
Retreating
France.
now would be
The
catastrophic.
English, however, would retain control of Calais until 1558, but the war left both nations exhausted and forever changed. The Hundred Years' War had far-reaching consequences for both England and France. For England, the war marked the end of the medieval feudal system and the rise of more centralized power. The conflict also saw the rise of national identities in both countries. In France,
Après
the
l'obscurité,
war helped shape
la
the
lumière.
foundation of the French
C'est le
state
temps
and
de la
contributed
France
to the
nouvelle.
development of royal power.
We cannot
The
allow
war
king
also
this
had
continued
profound
interference.
effects
The
on
future of
military
England
tactics,
rests on this
including
parchment.
the increasing
Nonsense! You seek to
importance of
undermine the
infantry
stability of the
over
realm.
cavalry. It introduced
The
the
English
longbow as a
longbow
dominant
proved
weapon
decisive at
and
Agincourt.
influenced the
We
development of
must
more
adapt our
professional armies.
strategies. But
It
the
also
cost of
marked the
this
gradual
treaty
decline of
signifies
the
a new
chivalric
era of
order and
prosperity
the
for
beginning
both our
of a
nations.
new era
Indeed,
of
my
warfare.
friend. May
In
this peace be
conclusion,
as
the
enduring
Hundred
as our
Years' War
trade.
was not